byLiu Cixin predict that there would be dead and missing scientists in his trilogy, Remembrance of Earth's Past. You may know this as Three Body Problems, not just an incredible book, but a Netflix series as well, where season 2 should be coming out late 2026. Is this another Matrix showing us behind the scenes of what is actually going on with humanity and our future? This video is going to get no reach, but I refuse to be silenced, and I refuse. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Ashley Brianna Eve. I have over 15 years of experience in the industries of branding, marketing, and PR. And on this channel, I bring you behind the scenes of trending stories to see what is actually happening, the media manipulation, the narrative control, and the spin that the powers that be want you to believe. This is part 2 within my series breaking down the missing and dead scientists and maybe the truth of what's really going on. Now, before we dive too far into this episode, I want to ask you, have you seen Three Body Problems on Netflix? Or maybe you've read the incredible trilogy by byLiu Cixin called The Remembrance of Earth's Past. Three Body Problems is volume 1. And my question to you is, did he predict this? Because we're seeing the news blow up with missing scientists, both in Iran and in China. In fact, the stories that are coming out of China are asking, is there a silent war against scientists? That after US scientists go missing, there's also mysterious deaths happening in China as well. It says here, as the US grapples with a series of disappearances and deaths of scientists, a similar pattern has emerged in China, where experts in the field of hypersonics and space defense have died under mysterious circumstances. This has prompted some to ask if it's a coincidence or part of a larger conspiracy. And stick around to the end, because you know, if you are someone that's been in this community for a while, I'm obsessed with actually declassified information and the church committee, because when we look at the truth of what has been discovered about the government, both on the right and the left, there is a lot that is being kept from you and a lot that's been quietly exposed. So stick around to the end. I want to show you the actual findings that suggest this could actually, a coordinated global attack against scientists could be grounded in reality and not just a conspiracy. Now, if we go back to the missing scientists and the dead scientists in Three Body Problems, it involves high-level experts in nuclear physics, aerospace engineering, astrophysics, and advanced material science. Does that sound familiar? I'm starting to wonder if Liu had a glimpse into the future and knew where we were going, because his sci-fi series hits the nail on the head and has eerie similarities. So if we go over to this story in Three Body Problems, and you haven't seen it yet, it talks about an advanced civilization that identifies Earth as a future threat. They can't destroy us outright, not yet at least, not from where they are. So they implement a different type of strategy. They systematically eliminate the people on Earth who are closest to the next technological breakthroughs, the scientists, the researchers, the ones who hold the knowledge that would allow humanity to advance fast enough to defend itself. And remember, if you watched part 1, some of the missing and dead scientists were exactly that. Researchers and scientists who were directly involved with defending Earth from asteroids. Interesting, right? Now, in Three Body Problems, they don't announce it. They don't leave any evidence. The deaths, wouldn't you know it, look like suicide. The disappearances look like mental health breakdowns. And because there's no fingerprints, no crime scenes, and no traceable mechanism, the official explanation closes the loop every single time. And a detective starts to notice the pattern, but nobody believes him. Now, I'm going to show you something. We're going to break it down here, because I'm not insinuating that an alien species is taking out our scientists. I'm asking in complete seriousness, as someone who has spent 15 years studying how institutions build and protect narratives, and being the one that actually builds and protects narratives myself within the field, whether the mechanism of that story is playing out in the documented real world record, not as science fiction, but as a forensic framework. And I want to be very clear about something before we go any further. I'm also not saying that these scientists and researchers were murdered by the government. I don't know that. And I don't want to insinuate that and have someone show up at my house. What I am saying is this: the pattern is real, the mechanism matches. The historical precedent of this kind of coordinated institutional action exists in the congressional record. And the question of whether this is happening is not actually crazy. It's not a conspiracy theory. It is, in fact, the question the FBI claims to be trying to answer right now, although I have little faith in them. Now let's get into it, shall we? For anyone who has not seen Three Body Problems on Netflix or has not read the trilogy, The Remembrance of Earth's Past by Liu Cixin, I want to give a quick primer here because the parallel only works if you understand the actual mechanism of the story. So in Three Body Problem, you're introduced to an alien species and civilization called the Santi. They're 400 years away from Earth. They are more technologically advanced than us right now, but they know that human technological development is accelerating. They've done the math. And by the time they arrive, we might have surpassed them. So they need us to slow down. Send ahead 2 proton-sized supercomputers called sophons that embed themselves invisibly into Earth's scientific infrastructure. The sophons sabotage experiments. They make the foundations of physics appear to break down. And the scientists that got closest to understanding it started dying. Yet the deaths looked like suicides. The breakdowns looked like individual psychological failures, that someone's mental health fell apart. And because the sophons leave no evidence at all, there is, by design, no way to determine which scientists were genuinely driven to a breakdown and which were helped along. And this is something I talked about in the first part of this series. Yes, there is a likelihood that there are people on these lists that genuinely had mental health breakdowns and took their own lives. But who did, who didn't? And we have no way to actually determine that. And that was the whole premise of the book as well, in the infiltration of the Santi. Now, the genius of this mechanism is that it's self-obscuring. The official explanation closes a loop before anyone can question it. And here's the line from the book that I keep coming back to. There's no way to know which scientists have been murdered, which ones killed themselves, but in both cases, the common denominator remains the same. And I want you to hold that sentence in your mind because we're going to come back to it. And if you believe that this type of technology doesn't exist, there is a rabbit hole I suggest you go down because the technology that we, the citizens, are aware of is not even a fraction of what actually exists. Amy Eskridge had talked about this in her final text messages, videos, and Signal chat threads with colleagues and coworkers. This is very real. And the question is, who is trying to slow down technological advancements? Why would somebody want to stop these scientists from getting closer to certain answers? And why are the scientists and researchers that are going missing in the real world so similar to what was happening in Three Body Problems? If you haven't seen episode 1 of this series, the full timeline, including the government incentive and directive overlay, make sure to watch that after. I'll link it in the pinned comment within this video. It's critical because I go into every detail in each of these individuals' lives, the research that they were involved with, the connections to billionaires such as Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Larry Ellison of Oracle. However, let's do a quick overview, a compressed version, because I want to refresh your mind before we get into the similarities, the deep similarities between Three Body Problems and what's happening in the real world. Since 2022, at least 12 people connected to America's most sensitive nuclear, aerospace, and defense programs have died or vanished, including defense programs in space, if something was to come towards Earth and be a threat, such as, they say, asteroids. Now, Amy Eskridge was the first one. She is an anti-gravity researcher. She died in 2022. It was ruled a suicide. However, 1 month before she died, she texted her business partner saying, "If you see any report that I killed myself, I most definitely did not." Now, before we go further, I want to show you a video that she had texted to a colleague because it gives more context on some of the technology that was being used against these researchers and scientists.
My hands have been burned to hell and back as I've been typing. Because you can beam me through there and through there. And you can get a 3D image of what I'm typing. Because this computer doesn't have a Wi-Fi card. You can't hack it. But you can maybe get a 3D image of me typing. So like we just did that. And did that as an act of pure desperation. And guess what? I feel better immediately. Like, my hands still burn because there's damage. But it's like my body relaxed when we barricaded the shit. And it was like, oh, like relief, like immediately. My hands had been burned.
Based on the videos that surfaced and what her colleagues had to say, she's talking about directed energy weapons, DEWs, and the technology is based on radio frequency K-band emitters. She reported that those energy weapons caused discolored, burned, or red marks on her hands that stopped at her wrist, right where her hand would come off her computer. And she documented and shared that with associates before her death, and then they shared it with the world. Now, again, remember, she worked on advanced propulsion and anti-gravity technology at the Institute of Exotic Science, believed to be targeted due to her work. And she spoke out that people were targeted, scientists were being targeted due to their work as well. Continuing on, we have Michael David Hicks, NASA JPL asteroid characterization and planetary defense, dead July 2023. Cause was never disclosed. Planetary defense. I want you to remember that. Matthew Sullivan, decorated Air Force intelligence officer, scheduled to testify before the Congressional UAP Task Force as a whistleblower, dead within 2 weeks of that testimony. Ruled a suicide. Cause of death was never officially disclosed. And people closest with him are now saying they are thankful that there's an investigation going on into his death. Will anything be revealed? Will anything be found? I highly doubt it. Frank Mywald, NASA JPL principal researcher, dead July 4th, 2024. No cause, no statement from NASA, nothing. Monica Reza is next, director of materials processing at JPL, the holder of a patent on advanced rocket alloys, missing since June 2025, just vanished on a hiking trail 30 feet behind her walking partner. She was never found. And interestingly enough, we're seeing her work show up with billionaires who have built space programs. You'll have to watch the other video to see that connection. Melissa Cassius, Los Alamos National Laboratory, missing phone factory reset before she left. Interesting note here is Melissa's phones were factory reset. Amy Eskridge had talked about hacking being done on her phone as well. Anthony Chavez, Los Alamos, missing. Stephen Garcia, nuclear weapons contractor, Kansas City National Security Campus, missing with a handgun. Nuno Loureiro, director of MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center, world-leading fusion physicist, shot at his apartment door, December 2025. General William McCaslin, retired commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory, oversaw the same classified materials and research program as Monica Reza. They worked together. They were highly connected. Vanished from his Albuquerque home 8 days after Trump signed the UAP declassification order. No phone, no glasses, but a revolver. Carl Grillmeyer, Caltech astrophysicist, planetary defense researcher. Yes, another planetary defense researcher, but it's all just a coincidence. Shot at his front porch, February 2026. So another person on the list taken out on their front porch by a shooter. Tony Moffat and his entire family, NASA aerospace engineer, 14 space shuttle missions, Army vet, defense researcher, and all 4 of them dead within a plane crash on April 2026. Make sure to watch my previous video on them as well, because we dive into the connections his son has to the cloud and AI. And David Wilcox, UFO researcher, actively covering the scientist's deaths on YouTube 24 hours before his death. Dead April 20th, 2026, 3 days after the Moffat crash, ruled a suicide. This is the record. 12 people in the US alone, not including the scientists missing in Iran, nuclear scientists, and China, over 4 years. The FBI claims they're investigating. I have little faith in that. Congress called it something sinister. So even Congress is saying that something's going on here. But again, I have little faith in anyone getting to the bottom of this. Now, I want to show you the 5 places where Liu Cixin's fiction becomes a forensic framework within reality. Parallel number 1 is the most important. The goal isn't punishment, it's suppression. The scientists within Three Body Problem aren't being punished for saying something or leaking anything or a disclosure. They're being eliminated very specifically to stop the forward progression of human technological capabilities. The goal is to essentially freeze the clock, remove the right people at the right time, so you do not just lose one scientist. You lose the decades of advancement their continued work and their brain would have produced. The sophistication of this is that it doesn't require eliminating everyone. It only requires eliminating the specific people at specific points where the next leap would have happened. And this is where you can argue, I mean, it's been 4 years since scientists started disappearing. It's not as if it's all happened in 2026. Now, let's apply that to the real timeline. Monica Reza was not just a hiker who went missing. She was the scientist who held the patent on advanced alloys going into reusable rockets being built on hundreds of billions of dollars in federal contracts. She was the next generation of that research. She disappears, and the research doesn't stop. That's the most important piece here. It continues without her institutional oversight, without her independent expertise, without her name on the next patent. So who is her research serving? And what's the goal they have for the information she was developing? Nuno Loureiro got shot at his door. He was the director of MIT's largest laboratory, a world leader in the plasma physics that underpins fusion reactor design. This was all about clean, limitless energy. If fusion advances on the timeline his work was tracking, it changes the global energy economy within a generation. He's gone. And the Department of Energy's relationship with private fusion startups continues to evolve, increasingly towards the kind of public-private knowledge transfer that removes the accountability structures of academic research. Carl Grillmeyer spent his career mapping near-Earth objects, building the scientific foundation of planetary defense. He was shot on his porch in February 2026. The following month, Blue Origin, aka Jeff Bezos, unveils its Neo Hunter planetary defense concept, built on the technology that Carl had developed and spent his life developing. But he's not here to see it. He's not here to be consulted on it. He's not here to question its use. Matthew Sullivan was an Air Force intelligence officer with direct knowledge of classified aerospace programs. And he was about to take that knowledge into a congressional hearing room, but he died before that testimony. The hearing never happened, and we'll never know what he was going to disclose. In every case, the removal is precise, targeted, and it serves a function. The knowledge continues forward, but now under different ownership, different oversight, and different accountability. The public institution loses, the private contractors are gaining. And that's not punishment. That's suppression. That is acquisition. That is the three-body problem. Parallel to the suicides that may not be suicides. In the show and in the book, the mechanism is designed to be impossible to prove. You cannot determine from outside the system which deaths were genuinely self-inflicted and which ones were made to look that way. The official explanation is always available. It always closes the loop. That is exactly the situation that we're in with these real world cases. Amy Eskridge, officially a suicide, even though a month before she died, she sent a text message explicitly saying, "Do not believe the reports if this comes out." Years ago, she spoke about how scientists lose their lives in these fields, and yet she commits suicide. So they say. Matthew Sullivan, described as a suicide, the case sat with a local Virginia medical examiner, not a federal investigation, for nearly 2 years. The congressman who eventually intervened said publicly He was scheduled to come in for an interview within 2 weeks. He had suspiciously committed suicide. Even the congressman that was working with him said it was suspicious. That's a sitting member of Congress using the word suspiciously committed suicide about a suicide ruling of someone that was reportedly going to come forward with information in front of Congress. But he can't anymore. And we don't know what he was going to say. David Wilcox, officially a suicide, but 3 days after the Moffat crash, while actively covering the scientist's deaths on his platform, after posting publicly in 2022, I plan on living, not suicidal at all, after he himself said that it's odd how all these scientists are going missing. Another convenient death. And I'm not telling you these were staged. I genuinely don't know. I don't have that insider information or know who would do that. What I'm telling you is the problem that Liu Cixin put at the center of his science fiction trilogy basically says you cannot know from outside the system which is which. And that is the same problem the FBI is now trying to solve in real life, so they say. The mechanism doesn't require certainty. It only requires enough ambiguity that the official explanation holds, and it is held until now. Parallel 3, the cult of true believers. This is the part of the three-body problem that doesn't get talked about enough, and I think it's the most sophisticated element of what Liu Cixin was really saying. The Santi don't operate through purely external force. They operate partly through recruitment. They identify the humans who are most disillusioned with the current order of things and offer them something different. Some of Earth's most brilliant people choose knowingly to help the Santi, not because they're weak, not because they're stupid, but because they've looked at what humanity is currently producing and they've decided the Santi, the entity they're helping, has the potential to produce something better. They're not positioned as traditional villains in this story. They've made a rational calculation about the side of history they want to be on. And I want you to ask yourself, if something coordinated is happening to these scientists, who is facilitating it? Might not be an alien civilization, could be human beings, right? Human beings with access to institutional power, private capital, defense contracts, and maybe potentially surveillance infrastructure of the most powerful government on Earth. I'm not saying this is happening, I'm saying it's a possibility. And if something like this is actually happening, if it is coordinated, there is a real possibility that some of those humans believe sincerely that what they're doing is right, that the transfer of scientific knowledge from slow, maybe accountable public institutions to faster, more agile, private ones, billionaires, is more efficient. That the consolidation of defense technology into fewer hands makes the country safer. That the people removed represented friction in the system that needs to move at the speed of the moment we're in. They might see this as the side of history they want to be on. You don't need monsters for this to make sense. You need a boardroom full of people who have decided which side of history they want to be on. The cult and three-body problems wasn't made out to be evil. It was all made out to be conviction. Parallel number 4, the wall facers. In the second arc of Liu Cixin's trilogy, and it threads through the Netflix adaptation, humanity faces a specific problem. The Sophons can interpret and intercept every form of communication, similar to what Amy Eskridge was concerned about, right? Even though her computer was hack-proof, the technology to intercept what she was typing was there. Every plan, every strategy, every disclosure, the moment it's transmitted between humans, the Santi know about it. There's no secure channel that exists. There's no private conversation anymore. And you could argue that there's a legitimate concern in regards to AI and there being no private conversation anymore. I mean, how many times have you talked about maybe a spaghetti recipe and then all of a sudden, wouldn't you know, you didn't search it. You didn't type it into Google. You just said it to someone and you're being fed ads. You're being fed suggested for you blogs on spaghetti recipes. So I would argue that this is something we are currently already dealing with in our world, and that's not a conspiracy theory. Now, the solution in three-body problem is the wall facer program. 3 individuals are chosen to formulate humanity's defense strategy entirely inside their own minds. They can never explain their reasoning. They can never share their plan. Their behavior to the outside world appears completely irrational because the logic lives in a place no one else can access. The wall facers do things that look insane because the only place the plan is safe is inside a single human mind. We look at General McCaslin, commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory, the man who directly oversaw classified aerospace materials research, the man connected to Monica Reza's work, vanishes from his Albuquerque home 8 days after Trump's ordering UFO files to be declassified, 8 days after billions of files regarding UFOs disappear from the Black Vault website. He leaves his phone, he leaves his glasses, he leaves every device that can be tracked or intercepted. He takes a revolver, though. David Wilcock spends his final live stream expressing gratitude for being alive and saying people are disappearing. He posts what reads in retrospect like a record of a mental state, not for the people reading it, but for whoever would be reading it later. Matthew Sullivan, in the weeks before his scheduled testimony, was, according to people closest to him, operating under pressure that he couldn't articulate to the people around him. That's what people are saying. There was a pressure, but he said he couldn't articulate it. And now I'm not saying these people were wall facers. I'm saying that the behavioral pattern the fiction describes, people who know something so dangerous, they cannot say it. In a world where channels of communication cannot be trusted, does not require alien surveillance technology to produce. It only requires a world where certain truths, if said, have consequences that cannot be survived. We live in that world. The Church Committee proved it 50 years ago, and I'm going to show you that right now. We're going to pause the 3 body problem parallels for a moment because I want to make sure you understand something before we go any further. What I'm describing, a coordinated program of institutional action to silence, discredit, or eliminate people who hold knowledge that threatens powerful interests, is not a theory, and it's certainly not a conspiracy. It is documented. It is congressional records and reports you can read right now on government websites for free on the internet. This is the Church Committee, the United States Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities, convened in 1975, chaired by Senator Frank Church of Idaho. The committee spent 16 months reviewing 110,000 pages of classified documents and interviewing 800 witnesses. Their final report required 6 volumes and 2,702 pages. You can read all of it right on their website, freely available on the Internet Archive and on state.gov. So what did they find? They had some shocking findings. COINTELPRO, the FBI, ran a covert counterintelligence program from 1956 to 1971 without congressional authorization, without oversight, without legal authority, specifically designed to disrupt and discredit the activities of groups and individuals deemed a threat to the social order. The program targeted civil rights organizations, anti-war protesters, academics, scientists, journalists, and political figures. The Church Committee's own report stated the Bureau conducted a sophisticated vigilante operation aimed squarely at preventing the exercise of First Amendment rights of speech and association. Among the documented targets were Martin Luther King Jr. The FBI surveilled him, harassed him, and sent him an anonymous letter suggesting he should kill himself. This is all in the records. They surveilled him, harassed him, and sent him letters suggesting he should kill himself. And we think that the government and these agencies can't intervene with these scientists? That's all just a coincidence? Operation MKUltra was also discovered within this investigation. The CIA ran a covert human experimentation program. Yes, it is not a conspiracy. It is true. And it was without the knowledge or consent of subjects, testing mind control techniques using high doses of LSD and other drugs on American citizens. It ran it for over a decade. When it was finally exposed, the CIA director had already ordered the destruction of most of the records. The program only came to light because 20,000 documents survived in a financial records office that wasn't targeted in the destruction order. It sounds a lot like how President Donald Trump had spoke about releasing and declassifying all this UFO information. And then 2 hours later, billions of files that had been declassified on the Black Vault website disappear. Not from corruption, from deletion. We also found out about Operation Mockingbird through these investigations. The CIA recruited journalists at major American news outlets to spread propaganda, to actively shape what the American public believed about domestic and foreign events. Point? To actively shape what the American public believed about both domestic and foreign affairs and events. Project Shamrock was also discovered. The NSA convinced major American telecommunications companies to hand over copies of all international telegrams going in and out of the United States for decades, without a warrant, without congressional knowledge, without legal authority to do so. We also discovered assassination plots. The CIA documented in their own internal reports, which they called the family jewels, plots to assassinate foreign leaders such as Fidel Castro. The committee confirmed the United States government had operated assassination programs. And here's a quote I want you to write down. This is Senator Frank Church himself speaking on NBC's Meet the Press, August 17th, 1975. I know the capacity that is there to make tyranny total in America, and we must see to it that this agency and all agencies that possess this technology operate within the law and under proper supervision so that we never cross over into that abyss. That is the abyss from which there is no return. Now, he was talking about the NSA in 1975. Before the internet, before GPS, before smartphones that seem to understand your thoughts and your communication with your loved ones, before Oracle and Larry Ellison held top security military AI contracts, before every federal agency ran on a single company's cloud infrastructure. That's Oracle and Larry Ellison as well. The abyss he was describing, we may be standing at the edge of it right now. None of those programs were conspiracy theories. They were real. They were documented, and they tried to cover them up and destroy documents before they could be found out. They were denied for years, sometimes decades, sometimes even currently, before the documentation became undeniable. So when I ask whether something coordinated could be happening to these scientists, I'm not asking where the government is capable of it. The Church Committee proved and answered that 50 years ago. The answer is yes, the government is capable of doing this. I'm asking whether it is happening now, whether it is a global attack on the future of science and aerospace defense, of the scientists that are at the evolutionary leap into new technology. And that is a legitimate question to be asking right now. Parallel 5, the last one. Science isn't broken, it's been captured. And I want you to really sit with this, especially after everything we've discussed today. In 3 body problems, the soft-ons interference produces what characters describe as broken science. The experiments stop working. The foundations stop making sense. Progress effectively halts. And because the interference is completely invisible and leaves no trace, it looks from inside the scientific community like a crisis of knowledge rather than a crisis of sabotage. That's a precise description of what institutional capture looks like from the inside. And here's the thing I need you to understand about what happens when the people on this list are removed from the equation. Their research doesn't stop. Their data doesn't disappear. Their patents don't expire. The knowledge transferred. And we can connect the dots of the knowledge transferring to people such as Elon Musk of SpaceX, Jeff Bezos, and Larry Ellison. Billionaires also connected to the US government. Monica Reza's advanced rocket alloy patent continues to be used in programs building the next generation of reusable rockets. Programs now receiving billions of dollars in federal contracts from SpaceX and Blue Origin, who is Jeff Bezos. Her absence doesn't slow those programs down. Her absence means they proceed without her oversight, her independent expertise, her institutional memory of what the original point of this research was for and what the end goal was. Carl Grillmeyer's planetary defense maps flow directly into Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos, Neil Hunter. And the crazy thing is, that was announced 1 month after he was shot on his porch. Yes, Carl's work flowed directly into Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin 1 month after he was shot on his porch. The science didn't break. It was purchased. It was transferred to a billionaire. Nuno Loureiro's fusion research continues at MIT, but it continues in an environment where the Department of Energy's relationship to private fusion startups is evolving rapidly towards a kind of public-private knowledge transfer that, in every other defense-adjacent field, has meant the privatization of publicly funded research and the removal of public accountability structures. So what are they doing with his research? Are we still looking at limitless energy, reusable energy? What are they doing with his research? I want to know. William Moffett, 28 years old, was a cloud security administrator with his Azure administrative certification, working defense IT cloud security at a Huntsville firm called Summit 7. That's not generic tech work. That's classified government cloud infrastructure security. The ecosystem where Oracle, Microsoft, and Amazon are currently fighting a multi-hundred billion dollar contract. And this war over who gets it is the control over America's most sensitive data. He died in that plane with his father, his mother, and his brother. Science isn't breaking. Science is being captured by the few. Very similar to how legacy media and social media and every media organization is being captured by Larry Ellison and Oracle and his family. And the people who have complicated that capture, who held the institutional memory, the independent expertise, and in some cases, the classified knowledge of what the original research was for, are gone. And we don't know how their research is being used in the hands of the new owners of it. That is real world SOFON, exactly what we saw in Three-Body Problems. Not a supercomputer, just the systematic removal of the humans at the nodes where knowledge, accountability, and independent capability intersect. The question the show Three-Body Problems asks, and what it means here. At the center of Three-Body Problems is a question Liu Cixin never fully answers because it doesn't have a clean answer. Who decides what humanity is worth protecting? Yi, the scientist whose decision to invite the Santi to Earth sets the entire plot in motion in Three-Body Problems, makes that choice because she's watched humanity fail repeatedly and catastrophically to be worthy of its own existence. She's not wrong about what she observed. She's wrong about what she concluded. She says, well, you failed so repeatedly and catastrophically, you're not even worthy of your own existence, so I'm going to help the Santi. The real world version of this question is this. Who decides which scientific knowledge is allowed to advance, which is suppressed, which is privatized, and which is buried with the people who held it? Right now, in the documented record, the answer to that question is being written in a very small number of people with a very large amount of capital and a very direct line to the institutions that are supposed to provide oversight. And if episode 7 of the series is right, control over the infrastructure that processes, stores, and manages everything those people know and knew. That's not a conspiracy. That's a power structure. So is it coordinated? Here's where I land. It's hard to believe it's a coincidence. Yes, I think something coordinated is happening. I don't know who. I don't know the precise mechanism. I don't know which of these 12 deaths and disappearances are connected and which ones are genuinely coincidental. And that's the point. But I know this. The historical record, documented in 2,702 pages of congressional filings that you can read right now online, proves that the United States government has run covert programs to surveil, discredit, harass, and in some cases eliminate people who held knowledge or occupied positions that threatened institutional power. I also know that the deaths cluster around specific policy moments: the UAP declassification order, the congressional whistleblower hearings, the announcement of trillion-dollar private defense contracts. I know that the official explanation, suicide, no foul play suspected, no cause of death released, has been deployed consistently, and that in at least one case, a sitting congressman used the words suspicious about a suicide ruling. I know that the story got labeled as a conspiracy theory and opened a federal investigation in the same week, which raises red flags. And I know that Senator Frank Church stood in front of the American public 50 years ago and said that the capacity for tyranny existed in this country and warned us not to cross over into the abyss. I'm not saying we've crossed into the abyss. I'm saying the guardrails that were supposed to prevent it have been weakened, not strengthened, over the last 50 years. The Snowden revelations in 2013 showed that the surveillance reforms the Church Committee fought for have been quietly dismantled. And the people who have the most to say about what's happening right now are the people that are dead and missing. The question of whether this is coordinated is not crazy. It's not fringe. It's not conspiracy. It is a question the FBI is trying to answer, if you trust the FBI to answer that. And it deserves to be asked clearly, seriously, and without flinching by everyone who still believes that accountability is required and possible. Thank you for joining me for episode 2 of Cause of Death Classified. If it's your first time here, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit get notifications. My name is Ashley Brianna Eve, and I take my 15 years of experience in branding, marketing, and PR, and we perform cultural forensics on trending stories. We look at how narratives are built, protected, and destroyed, and who benefits from it. This is a 7-part series. Episode 7 is going to connect everything. So make sure that you subscribe and hit get notifications so that you don't miss it. And if you know someone that's curious about what's really going on with these missing and dead scientists, please share this video with them. And with that, thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys. What I found, nobody wants to hear.